I recently watched a video by Black Panther, one of my favourite YouTubers ever, on the subject of a Need for Speed Most Wanted 2005 remaster potentially being leaked for next year. Now, as you go through the video, it becomes quite clear that Simone Bailey, who played Cross's partner in that game, was most likely tricked by a concept video she saw on YouTube, or, you know, just tricked, you know, because of the whole NDAs that people need to sign. It's highly unlikely that one of the voice actors who actually work on the game would leak a game of that magnitude, you know. And it's an EA game, of course she'd have to sign an NDA. So I think it's quite obvious that a Need for Speed Most Wanted 2024 remaster just wouldn't, it's not happening. That is just not going to happen. And it does bring back the age-old question that does kind of phase out of my mind here and there. But where are all the Need for Speed remasters and remakes? Why do EA seem to be so scared of doing a Need for Speed remaster or remake? Or we're going to talk remake for this video, because in terms of remasters, I guess they tried to step into the water a little lightly with Need for Speed Hot Pursuit Remastered, but that game is highly divisive, and that's probably why they didn't do Most Wanted 2012 Remastered neither, which I was really disappointed by, quite frankly, because I really wanted to see a Need for Speed Most Wanted 2012 Remaster, because I love that game personally. In some ways I actually prefer it over Most Wanted 05, but I still want to see a remaster of that game. You know, I felt like Need for Speed Most Wanted 05, like, it has way too much filler, in my opinion. It drags, the game sort of drags on a little bit. It's still like a top 5 Need for Speeds in terms of what I think is the best, but it's not in my top 5 in terms of favourites. Most Wanted 2012 I know was a bad Need for Speed, in every sense of the word of what is a Need for Speed. But as a racing game on its own, Most Wanted 2012, in my opinion, is one of the best racing games that you can play. It holds up really, really well. And I'm talking all versions hold up well. You could play Most Wanted 2012 on console, PC, PS Vita, or you can even play the mobile version. They are all really good across the board. Like, I'm surprised nobody talks about how good that game was. When you take away the stigma of it being called Most Wanted, which it just should never have been called, but you know, it's still a great game, and I was very disappointed when we didn't end up getting that as a remaster, unfortunately. And we get onto the subject of Need for Speed Unbound, and after what has happened with that game, people's enthusiasm and support for the Need for Speed IP seem to be at a low again. We seem to be going so high and then so low. Since Rivals, we've been stuck in this little rotation here. Now, I'm not saying that any of these Need for Speed games that have released since Hot Pursuit are bad, but they're not, none of them seem to really be what anybody wants. You know, Hot Pursuit was not what most of the fan base wanted. Maybe at the time it was, but quite evidently now, it didn't do well for a reason. People don't want that type of game. I'm not hating on Hot Pursuit 2010, but I'm one of those people that didn't want that game. I acknowledge it's pretty good, but I didn't want it. You know? I feel like we've moved past that at this point. Even if the Run got remastered, I'd pretty much say the same thing. It's not what we want. And what we want is something along the lines of Underground and Most Wanted and Carbon. Carbon is the best Need for Speed and my favourite, in my opinion. I think Carbon is peak Need for Speed. Hell, I'd take an Undercover remaster, you know? Undercover is better than a lot of these games that we're getting recently. And again, that's taking nothing away from these Need for Speed games. The one that you're seeing right now, Need for Speed 2015, is in my top 5, easy, you know? Maybe even top 3. Like, I love Need for Speed 2015, regardless of the problems it did have. And Payback and Unbound, they're not bad games neither. I've never played Unbound because somebody thought it was a great idea to just put it next-gen exclusive when half the fan base, 3/4 of the fan base, didn't have a next-gen console and still don't. I don't, still. And a lot of people still don't. And a lot of people just haven't played Unbound for that reason. And You know, Unbound has proven to be a bit of a disappointment on the multiplayer sides of things. Again. And that's something that a Most Wanted remaster or remake wouldn't really cure, but it would definitely give a much better single-player story, you know? Heat was great. Payback, as much as a lot of people would want to hate on that game, you can't remove that from history, because if Payback doesn't exist, then Heat can't exist, you know? Heat exists because of Payback, and everything that they had built on for Payback. I don't know why Payback happened. We'll do a video on that one day. But yes, why has there not been a Need for Speed remake? You know, you see these franchises like Resident Evil, that got a remake, you know, and they keep remaking those games. They're doing so well. Metal Gear Solid, I am so excited for those games, you know. The only reason I've never played a Metal Gear Solid game, and the only reason I never played Metal Gear Solid 5, was quite simply because I wanted to play the first game, you know? And with these remakes, you know, this is going to be great. I can't wait to actually finally get into Metal Gear Solid in a way that feels satisfying, because I don't want to just jump into Metal Gear Solid 5, because I know how deep the lore is of that game. Need for Speed doesn't have this issue. Need for Speed resets the story every year, unless you count Most Wanted, unless you count Carbon and Underground 2. You know, Underground 2 and Carbon are literally the only exceptions to this rule. You know, you can't fully get it. Well, I mean, even then, you can still get into Underground 2 and Carbon. You know, there's no issue from a storyline's perspective to not put these remakes and remasters out. You know, you're not going to confuse anybody. And if anything, this is what people have been asking for since Rivals. Since probably even before that, but since Rivals at least, from what's been documented on YouTube, Rivals was the, like, 2013, 2012, Most Wanted 2012 time, was around the time when people were asking for these games to be remastered, you know? At this point, too much time has passed. You gotta remake them at this point, you know? I don't understand why they keep trying to make these new games to catch up. Like, I don't understand why Criterion would make Need for Speed Unbound with the intention of bringing it more to the mainstream, trying to get it more accessible, but then make it next-gen exclusive and have all this graffiti and anime shit in a city like Chicago. Chicago, bro. You take one look at these, you know, the art style that they went for in Unbound, you'd be thinking it was Tokyo that they were going to, not Chicago. Chicago would be Most Wanted, dark, gritty. Carbon story would suit Chicago. The Run's tone suits that, not Unbound. I understand Unbound is a revenge story, but it's too young feeling, you know? You see what I mean? It's not dark, it's not gritty enough. You know, Heat's story was in Miami and it suited it. Unbound would have suited Miami, but they put it in Chicago for some reason. You know, I don't understand why they would do that, and that's a whole nother topic in itself. Why are Need for Speed so afraid to go abroad, bro? Come on, everybody's been asking for Tokyo for over a decade now. Like, come on. If the Most Wanted remake does turn out to be true, which I really don't think it will be, but even then, I think that would be a little confusing. Why not just do Underground? Underground 1 would be such an easy game to remake. You're clearly not scared to take away the open world aspect with remasters, because Hot Pursuit Remastered did it, you know? So, you could do it. Underground would be so easy. You've got such a linear world. There's only like 15 cars, something like that. There's only 100 events that you would have to... Like, most of them are just redone tracks over and over. The drift tracks would be so easy to remake. Where's that? Where's the Need for Speed Underground remastered / remake? It's not like you've got anything to lose, because every time you try something new, it's always hit or miss. Every one of these games have an issue, and I feel like remaking a game would give you more time to actually work on the new modern ones.